Got to get used to this now in power football. The injury report video, the injury report, the reporting on the injuries. He's Ira Schofel, managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang. You're joining us here on Warchant TV. This edition of the Chant is going to be led by news and notes injury-wise for Florida State football against Virginia. Ira, they create a little graphic and everything. It's very NFL-ish now for I know there's gambling implications and transparency implications, but it happened Wednesday night that Florida State and Virginia released their first official injury report for this week's game.
Yeah, back at ACC kickoff in July, Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, announced that the ACC would be doing this now. And there's basically going to be two updates during the week, one about 48 hours before a game. So that's why Florida State's and Virginia's was released Wednesday night before the game on Friday. The other teams ostensibly will be released on Thursday. And then 2 hours before kickoff, there will be like one last update. And so the categories for this were basically guys who were out, guys who were probable, and guys who were questionable. And, there's a couple of surprises. Some of them, some of the guys are guys we knew, but there are a couple of surprises as well.
Here it is from the ACC. You can see it on the screen. Ira, a lot of names here that you can choose from, and I'll wipe this back up a second time, but where would you want to lead? What is the most unexpected thing you see on this list?
I don't know if it's unexpected, but, I think to some fans it might be. I mean, we kind of had a sense that a couple of those guys under the out list were shaken up in Saturday's game, particularly Cam Davis and Chase Lofton were two guys, the sophomore running back Cam Davis and freshman tight end wide receiver Chase Lofton. Those guys both went down during the Kent State game with injuries and did not return and looked pretty significant from the standpoint of it wasn't like a question about whether or not they could go in. And from what we understand, they have not practiced this week. Mike Norvell earlier this week said that Chase Lofton will probably be out for a period of time, which generally means maybe a number of weeks. Cam Davis, from what we can gather, it won't be quite as long. Maybe it's a miss one game, maybe two games, something along those lines, but nothing too serious. But those guys, and then the other guys that were out, I think were all ones that we kind of already knew. Well, Diamante Diggs, he actually backup defensive end, had played in each of the first three games. I did not know that he was hurt in that game against Kent State. I don't remember him leaving, but he also would have played later in the game, and we may just have missed it. But as far as Ethan Pritchard, obviously he's the linebacker who was tragically shot before the season. Roydell Williams, we knew he's been out for a few weeks. And then Gavin Markey's a freshman quarterback / tight end who has played one snap. It won't really factor too much in. But so, there's a few new names on that list of guys being out. None of them were necessarily starters, but, a few of them that had played in each of the first few games.
And then you look at the questionables and the probables to that category. Javen Boggs is questionable. That is relative news to me. And then you see Randy Pittman. Great to see that he is probable for this game. Keziah Holmes is probable for this game. There's a name, Ira, if we're looking at just past targets, that's not on the list at all, and that's Squirrel White. That's a good sign for Florida State that wide receiver Squirrel White has no designation whatsoever, but it looks like the wide receiver room is going to have to shuffle a little bit once again. Boggs could play. He's not doubtful. He's not out. But this is a situation where just in time that you're getting Squirrel White back up to 100%, clearly Javen Boggs is dealing with something.
Yeah, and we, I think we talked about it on the Smash, and you guys probably talked about Jeff's show as well. Like Squirrel White probably could have played against Kent State this past weekend. He was suited up. He went through some pregame warmups. I think he was available maybe on an emergency basis, but he really healed quickly. Originally looked like a pretty serious, painful wrist or hand injury. Turned out to be not to be very significant, and he is expected to play for sure this week. As you say, he's not even on the list at all. Boggs, from what we understand, it doesn't sound like it's anything serious, which is why he's under questionable. Maybe just tweak something, and it sounds like they think he'll be able to play. I would be surprised if he doesn't play. I say that. He is questionable. We'll see, but I think there's a good chance he'll play. And then, the other two guys that are questionable are also really positive developments because Kevin Wynn and Caleb Lavalley are guys that haven't played down this season. Kevin Wynn was hurt during the preseason, and it was expected to be in that defensive line rotation. And then Caleb Lavalley's been out for a while with an off-season injury. So those are two guys who are coming back. If they're not back this week, then certainly they seem like they'll be back next Saturday.
And then you see it in the probable category, quarterback Tommy Castellanos. He was not limping by the end of the game. Press conference, I know, Ira, you reported that from the press room. And then Keziah Holmes, who did not dress last week. You saw him. He had his jersey on, no pads, no helmet, nothing like that. But he is back in the probable category. So Florida State, by and large, is in a fairly good spot. And clearly, Ira, I would think for everybody has eyes towards that next game. You got to focus on the Virginia one first. But Juju Wynn being available for the Miami game seems to be on track if he's questionable for this week's game against Virginia, which is something that I think was the first question we were asking ourselves when he was ruled out for the Alabama game to start the season. Is this a half-season thing? Is this a November thing? Could he be back by Miami? Looks like Juju Wynn is right back on track for the second ACC game of the season against the Hurricanes.
Yeah, I think unless there's some sort of setback, I think he's definitely going to be available for the Miami game. And honestly, if they can get him a few snaps against Virginia, that would be great. But much more important to get him available for the Miami game. And then Randy Pittman, as you said earlier, he's a guy that played a really key role in the Alabama game. They knew he was going to miss at least a couple weeks with having a little minor procedure done. But to get him back for this game is huge as well. So I think there's a good chance that, they're going to be about as healthy as you could possibly hope based on things that happen early in the season or in preseason camp. Yeah, I think they're feeling a lot better about their health and well-being than maybe Virginia is.
Great segue, because I was going to say, if the list for Florida State was as long as the list for Virginia is, I'm going to put it up in a second, Florida State would be in big trouble. Here it is. We knew that Virginia had a lot of off-season summer injuries and preseason camp injuries, but get a load of this, everybody. My goodness, it takes 2 columns for the outs on the Virginia Cavaliers list, and then questionable and probable. These are the 2 people that most everybody are circling, and Ethan Sipe and Brady Wilson, starters on the offensive line for Virginia. But my God, Ira, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4 offensive linemen that are out, 3 defensive backs, 2 receivers, a partridge in a pear tree. Virginia's got a lot of injuries on that offensive line, and 2 critical pieces in Brady Wilson, Ethan Sipe. I know that locally speaking, Cavs media and Cavs fans were happy to see that Sipe was listed as probable, because it didn't seem like that was going to be the case earlier in the week. But Virginia dealing with a whole lot of problems relative to what Florida State is dealing with for this week's game.
Yeah, and obviously some of these guys are guys that maybe they weren't counting on, but some were. And when you do have clusters of injuries, that's what you really hate to ever have happen, because just affects your overall depth. So if they do have their center available, which it sounds like there's a decent chance they will, he's listed as questionable, I believe. And then Sipe is listed as probable. Those are 2 guys that they'd love to have available. But, if they don't have those guys, again, when you have all those other guys who are out as well, it just, at some point it affects your ability to just substitute players. So they've been hit. I mean, they definitely were hit hard in preseason camp. And, they've still managed to go 3-1 in their first 4 games. So it's not debilitating them. But over time, when you have that many injuries, it definitely can weigh up, especially at one position.
I think one of the hardest things to look at for this game, Ira, is Virginia's schedule leading up to Florida State. What is the Wolfpack of NC State this year in 2025 as a football program? That question and answer, I think, help inform how you feel how this game's going to go in the trenches for Florida State, both when the defensive line is going up against a banged-up Virginia Cavaliers offensive line and vice versa. They haven't exactly played murderer's row. Not that Florida State has, but Florida State does have the marquee matchup against Alabama. This is a very difficult game to, I don't want to use the term handicap in a betting sense. I'm just talking about envisioning how the chess pieces move on the board. This is a tough one to sift through, and Virginia's about to be tested in a way that I don't think they have been, especially in the trenches for Friday night's game.
Yeah, it's tough. This game to me, and it happens a lot early in seasons, but it's particularly, I think, accentuated with these 2 teams based on who they played so far. But it's just hard. It's hard to get a common feeling in terms of common opponents or even a feeling for common situations. As you said, they did play NC State, but that was on the road. Florida State's going to be coming into Charlottesville, so that's a little bit different as well. Florida State did have one big name opponent. They played Alabama. It was a huge win, one of the best wins of the season for anybody in college football, but that was at home. and this is their first game on the road. So it's hard to compare apples to apples a whole lot with either of these teams. And so I think for that reason, I think that's part of the reason the line is probably relatively low. I think you and Jeff talked about it a little bit this week, that on the Jeff Cameron show, that 7 seems a little bit low if you looked at these two teams. But I think that's because there's so many variables. I think people aren't exactly sure what to know or how confident to feel in either of these teams, good or bad.
You're going to be hitting the road and covering this game from Charlottesville on Friday night. Is there any sense that you get about Florida State's readiness, about Florida State's attention to detail? Because I will tell you from the outside, not being in those press rooms for these interviews as you have been these last few days this week, they're saying all the right things, and the rhetoric that's being used by coordinators and head coach Mike Norvell seems to be dialed in. Virginia clearly had their attention during the bye week, and they clearly had their attention, I think, even during some game weeks, East Texas A&M and Kent State. How do you sense, because I think outside people look at the schedule and they see Virginia followed by Miami, and everybody knows what Miami's going to be, 7:30 primetime kick, all that. You think they're dialed in for this one?
I think they will be. I think that a combination of a couple things working in their favor. One is, probably 3 things working in their favor. One is, as you said, in the 2 games leading up to this game, plus a bye week, they really didn't have to focus too much on those opponents. So they could kind of really focus on Virginia and Miami. I think there's a good chance they've done some stuff, some advanced work for Miami as well, because Miami's got a bye week this week leading up to that game. So that's one thing. Another thing is Virginia's got off to a really good start, and they're putting up big numbers offensively, not against great competition, but they're putting up big numbers. So I think that's something that would get their attention. And then the third thing I think that's really helping this team is just the maturity of this roster. I mean, you just have so many guys that have played so much football. You talk about on the offensive line, guys like Micah Pettis, who played in the SEC, and Gunnar Hansen, who played in the SEC, and Luke Pettibone is a starter in the ACC for 3 years. I mean, all these guys have played. Adrian Medley started a bunch of games. Richie Leonard started a bunch of games. This isn't their first rodeo. I think when you look across the defense, Florida State's got some older dudes on the defensive line. They got some older dudes in linebacker. I just feel like this is a team that's very experienced. So even if some guys maybe aren't as dialed as they need to be, so many guys are, that's going to kind of get everybody back on task. So I think Florida State's going to play well. And if they do play well, I really like their chances. I mean, I think they're a more talented team. But, again, we have to see how it plays out. Weird things happen on the road. Weird things happen on Friday nights. But I do think they've prepared really well from everything we've heard.
I'm going to ask you the thing that you're looking forward to finding out the most in just a second. But first, a word from our friends at Whataburger and the touchdown tour that obviously came to Tallahassee for opening weekend, physically in Tallahassee. But when first unwrapping your Whataburger, you may find yourself awestruck by what's in front of you. Hot, fresh, made to order on a 5-inch toasted bun with 100% never frozen American beef patty grilled to perfection. Melty cheese, crisp, hand-chopped veggies, and mustard. It may sound more like art than food. Some even consider it a masterpiece, and they aren't wrong. Whataburger, just like you like it. And now I'm hungry for a Whataburger.
No kidding.
We might have to pull these colors down, though, because the touchdown tour looks a little bit UVA-ish. We'll leave it up there because they're paying for it to be there. But, Ira, I'm wondering your thoughts on Friday night, either from the binoculars and the press box perspective or just the storyline perspective. What is it you're most interested in learning about Florida State on Friday?
I don't know that I'm going to learn a ton. If there's one thing I'm going to learn, I think maybe it might be a little bit more about the defensive line. We felt like they certainly passed the first test against Alabama in that opener. Coming into the season, I was very confident in the secondary, probably a little less confident in the linebackers and the defensive line. They all played really well against Alabama. And then these last 2 games, who the hell knows? It's just they're not playing very good competition. So it's hard to say they followed up on what we saw in the first game, other than, they were focused and they were happy to be there or cared to be there. And that was what we wanted to see in those games. But I think the defensive lines are going to be one that, again, Virginia's offensive line has played pretty well. They've only given up 1 sack so far this season, even though they had some injury concerns. Their lines played well. They've done a real job of moving, Chandler Morris in the pocket, getting him out of the pocket, getting him some clean throwing lanes and things like that. So, can this Florida State defensive line really disrupt what Chandler Morris wants to do? Can they really put pressure on him, force him into make some off-balance throws, off-platform throws? I don't think Virginia is going to have a ton of success running the football against Florida State, but I do think FSU has to do a really good job of affecting Morris to kind of affect that passing game. And that's something that I don't know that I could say it's definitely going to happen because it's been almost a month since we saw them against Alabama.
Yeah, well, and there are times where the affecting of the quarterback is to contain him and keep him within the pocket.
Right.
Sometimes that's part of the game plan too, especially with somebody whose legs are as much of a weapon as Chandler Morris' legs are. But there are other times when you got to pin your ears back or do as Tony White often does, create stunts and angles in order to disrupt and create the havoc. They're going to be asked to do a lot, and this is a tough assignment because unlike Ty Simpson at Alabama and the way that Ryan Grubb called it, Ira, this is an offense that wants to run the quarterback, that wants to use his legs. Ty was using that as a last resort. This is going to be a little bit different. I don't know that he's quite on Tommy Castellanos level in terms of, okay, I'm ready to go, and here I go at 100 miles an hour, but it ain't exactly 1, 2, 3, 4 progressions and take off either. The thing that I'm looking forward to the most, just to find out, how does Virginia want to play Florida State on offense? Let's say that they do put together a 65-yard drive in the beginning of the game. Do they do so by running the play clock down inside of 10 seconds before every snap, or do they want to continue playing up-tempo, which is what they normally do offensively? Do they try to shrink the game and count possessions, or do they try to get into a track meet with Florida State? You could make a case for either path. I don't know what they're going to do, but I'm excited to see how they decide to attack it because, Ira, if they do decide to take the air out of the ball, that tells you what they saw on film is, oh, Lord, if we decide to go play 12 possessions apiece, we're dead meat.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the approach. Just because, and if you look at their game against NC State, they had some long sustained drives. They did a good job of moving the football without just having a bunch of explosive plays. They did have some explosives against Stanford and some of these other teams, but I think NC State's probably comparable in the ballpark of Florida State athletically. So I think they're going to try to again move the football. Do a good job of mixing the pass and the run, keeping the defense off balance, and just trying to kind of keep the chains moving because that will really help their defense. Whether or not they can do it, we'll see. I think this Florida State defense has shown an ability to be physical, shown an ability to really gang tackle, to force a lot of punts, to really get after. I mean, they played exceptionally well against Alabama, but to your point, that is a big difference. Ty Simpson was not a willing runner. He could run, and he has shown he has the ability to run. He was not a willing runner on that night, I think, because of some of Florida State's physicality. Chandler Morris is a willing runner. He's going to be game. He's a guy that's played a lot of college football. He knows that he's got to do that for them to have a chance. So, we'll see how they handle that because, that always can be an equalizer, just like we know of Florida State and Tommy Castellanos. If you have a quarterback who's willing to run and can run, it can really change things.
Going to recap here very quickly Florida State's injury report. Is there going to be a one more thing on the other side of this, good sir?
I'm good, buddy. No one more things tonight.
All right. Well, then the one more thing that we're going to describe is Florida State, again, out for the game. Cam Davis, Roydell Williams at running back, DeMonte Diggs, defensive lineman, Gavin Markey, Chase Lofton, Ethan Pritchard, questionable, Javen Boggs, Caleb LaValle, Kevin Wynn, and then probable. Good news for Florida State. Tommy Castellanos, we had projected that. But to see Randy Pittman at probable is good news. Keziah Holmes, who was inactive last week, at probable is good news. And then Jonathan Daniels. You hope you don't have to dip into the offensive line reserves for Jonathan Daniels in a close game, but you never know. If Florida State's offense does fly high on a Friday night in Charlottesville, maybe Daniels gets on the field for the right reasons, which is extra snaps and experience. For Irish Rafael, my name is Tom Lang. This has been the Chant. Oh, no way.
What if I lied to you? What if I lied to you, Tom?
What you got?
One more thing. All right. So just want to share some information. So we do the Warchant report. People can watch that on Warchant TV. That's been available. That breaks down some of the matchups. But we also have on the website at warchant.com. If you go to the website on Thursday, it'll be posted. Matt Lacer does a matchup breakdown where we look at all of the matchups in the game. Florida State's running a game against Virginia's run defense, so on, both sides of the ball. Also, our predictions are in there as well. So you get a lot of content here at Warchant TV, but if you want a full written breakdown of all the matchup analysis for this game, go to warchant.com and start your free $1 for a week trial if you are not already a subscriber.
Not to mention what you can do on a game day. It's wonderful. You get all the coverage head to toe, and you can hop into the Tribal Council. It's the largest FSU fan community in the business, and the live game thread is usually pretty lit, as the kids used to say. They don't say that anymore. And then all the post-game coverage that comes after it with columns and features and insights and analysis, all there at warchant.com. $1 for your first week, and you'll be bonused a membership to The Athletic if you head over that way. And that's to say nothing of recruiting. And Ira, I don't know, it might even make it into the Chant next week because of how big a recruiting week it is for Florida State with Miami coming to town. It is going to be quite busy. This has been the Chant. He's Ira. I'm Tom. Thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up, like the channel, or like the video, subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. Leave us a review via podcast, and we'll talk to you next time right here on the Warchant Multimedia Networks.